Judy, Bo, and LaRose. Again, I'm going to ask you to please hold your applause so that we can get through our speakers.
I'm from Rochester, New York, and I am not directly impacted because I do not live in the area that other people do. But I am part of New York, and I'm concerned about the transportation infrastructure issues. From the SGEIS itself, the projected scenarios for total wells constructed within the Marcellus and Utica shale regions during a 1 to 30-year build-out period have a low estimate of 10,000 up to 42,000 wells. It is because of these large number of wells and the truck traffic that's going to be associated with them that we need to be concerned. Table 6.63 of the DSGEIS gives values for the number of annual heavy truck trips statewide at 8.89 million for year 1, 44.8 million for year 5, and then increasing up to 89 million trips by year 10 in the following 20 years. Local roads are not designed for this level of heavy traffic, and even state roads constructed to bear commercial loads will suffer degradation over time. An internal document dealing with hydrofracking from the New York State Department of Transportation states that it will be necessary to reconstruct hundreds of miles of roads and scores of bridges and undertake safety and operational improvements in many areas. The annual cost to undertake these transportation projects are estimated to range from 90 to 156 million for state roads and 121 to 222 million for local roads. There is no mechanism in place allowing state and local governments to absorb these additional transportation costs without major impacts to other programs and municipalities in the state. The Section 711 of the GSGIS transportation mitigation measures suggest that gas drilling operators could be made responsible for transportation infrastructure repair and construction through road use agreements entered into with municipal governments. But few communities have developed such agreements, and these are necessary to allow them to recover the cost of the great increase in road usage. Before drilling permits are issued, a satisfactory means to pay for the rise in road repair and infrastructure costs must be established for all jurisdictions, and the gas industry must assume the cost to some extent, since it is going to be these companies that will benefit economically and not the local taxpayers.
Our next speaker is Marilyn Catherine, and then it will be Joyce Herman.
My name is Marilyn Catherine. I'm from Rochester. I have many concerns this afternoon. I want to address just two. First, regarding the impact of transportation on community life and environment. The SGEIS analysis deals with the impact of single well pads without taking into account the cumulative effect of thousands of well pads, which would seriously change the landscape of rural New York into a series of industrial complexes, increasing noise levels, increasing truck emissions, increasing chances of accidents and spills with trucks carrying hazardous fluids. No health analysis has been done to assess the consequences of the air pollution from increased truck emissions, impacts from noise, and constant industrial activity that will affect local populations. Such analysis needs to be completed. I'm from Rochester. These convoys won't be passing down Brooks Avenue at any time, but I can imagine what that would be like, and I would not want it in my backyard. I believe it is my moral obligation to care about others who will be affected. The Finger Lakes are my backyard. The Southern Tier is my backyard. We New Yorkers share great pride and enjoyment in the beauty of our state. The development of hydrofracking will change New York. We look to our government to protect the common good and preserve all the natural resources of our state, not just to push development of one at the expense of the others. I ask the DEC to be responsive to all the concerns that state residents are raising and not grant drilling permits for hydrofracking until real mechanisms are in place to handle potential dangers and problems, that their enforcement and their financing is litigated, and a true cost-benefit analysis is presented to the people. Secondly, regarding the lack of a public health impact analysis in this document. At the very least, we should not move forward with permits until we have that. To do otherwise would be involving New Yorkers in a biological experiment to which they have not given their consent.
Joyce Herman.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak about a topic I think we could all agree has enormous unknown ramifications for our economy, our environment, and our health. I speak as an individual, as a member of the Green Team of Rochester's Temple Sinai, and as a member of the steering committee of the Reformed Jewish Voice, a statewide advocacy arm of 1,000 Reformed Jewish congregations in New York State. We are grateful to the governor and New York State and the DEC for the moratorium that has given us time to begin to assess these ramifications. The Finger Lakes Regional Economic Development Council recently presented a strategic plan. It envisions a prosperous region that every person here would feel happy to live in. It includes collaborations to improve our health, create green energy, encourage innovative businesses, capitalize on a thriving magnet for businesses and tourism, support our robust agriculture and food processing industry, winemakers, wine researchers, producers of our organic products, as well as dairy, food, and beverage manufacturing. They boasted of the scenic beauty that has made the Finger Lakes and the wine country rapidly become an international destination, its beauty comparing favorably with California's Napa Valley and the Loire Valley in France. This emerging scenario can only come to fruition if we can be assured that toxic, polluting substances and processes will not be inserted, mixed with, and released from the earth into our water supplies and the air. We need to know the potential effects on the people working on these wells, on the water supply for the larger population, on the pathways of exposure, or the pathogenesis of disease caused by exposure before proceeding. The EPA has begun a peer-reviewed study which will be reported on in 2012 and 2014. They will study fluids before and after hydrofracking, as well as the wastewater from states already hydrofracking. It would seem prudent to wait for the results of these scientific government studies before proceeding and include their results in the CEJA's cumulative impact, health risk assessments, and toxic wastewater disposal plans. As a basis for its advocacy, the Reformed Jewish Voice of New York State looks to the book of Genesis, which calls us to till and tend the earth, and the expansion in Ecclesiastes, which says if we fail to heed this call, there will be nobody left to repair the damage we create. Reformed Jewish Voice is educating our congregations and New York State legislators about the environmental impacts of hydrofracturing while advocating for the urgent need to find alternative energy sources, thereby reducing our nation's dependence on fossil fuels. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Sue Staropoli, and then we will have Phyllis Korn. And again, please try and hold back on your applause.
My name is Sue Staropoli, and I'm from Rochester, and I'm speaking primarily as a parent and as a grandparent. I'm concerned that the SGEIS report has failed to consider the big picture in its presentation. In this report, the DEC focuses the report on the impact of the individual well. Yet with the development of the high-volume hydrofracking grass drilling, it's projected there will be thousands of well pads in the New York Marcellus Shale. 4 to 5 acres of land, I understand, are cleared for each well. A typical well pad adds 13,000 round-trip truck trips to local roads, plus the commensurate diesel emissions, increase in noise level, and increased chance of accidents. The overall long-term cumulative effect on the land, on wildlife habitat, on air quality, on rural community life, and the environment as a whole has not been adequately assessed. This is not prudent stewardship of our natural resources. Change is inevitable. I'm concerned about the overall dominating impact of this proposed industrialization that this will have on our beautiful and bountiful land of New York. I know change is inevitable, but how we will meet the change will mark us as either foolish or wise. I look to our government to listen for the wisdom here today. I trust you, the DEC, will be true to your mission, and as you've said on your website, to achieve this mission through the simultaneous pursuit of environmental quality, public health, economic prosperity, and social well-being, including environmental justice and the empowerment of individuals to participate in the environmental decisions that affect their lives. Fracking permits must not be granted until a true and objective cumulative impact analysis is presented to the people of New York. We must seriously consider what's best for 7 generations, the land and health and lifestyle we leave to our children and grandchildren.
Phyllis Korn.
I am Phyllis James Korn, 71 Hillary Lane, Penfield, New York, and also a resident of Scroon Lake, New York, in the Adirondack Park. I am a mother, grandmother, and concerned for the planet that we will leave our children. I drink the water from Canadice and Hemlock Lakes, watersheds, and from our own private well in the mountains, and I share the concerns of all fresh well water users. I oppose hydrofracking at this time and for the following reasons. The risk to our waters from methane, unknown chemicals, radioactivity, wastes, the inadequacy of regulations or resources to protect and to monitor violations, damage to local infrastructure and inadequate resources for repair, distribution of invasive species, further acceleration of climate change, and exaggerated claims of local economic benefit. I'll only focus on water for the purposes of the time restraints. The risk to the water resources and the aquifers of New York is significant. We live here in one of the richest reservoirs of fresh water on the planet. The Great Lakes Basin. We risk its pollution before we know the full consequences of this technology. And once pure water is polluted, its quality may not ever recover. Hydrofracking chemicals have not yet been specifically and publicly identified. Chapter 7 of the SGEIS on mitigation has language that seems to be contradictory. Will or will not public disclosure be required? Flowback fluids contain harmful chemicals. You've seen the lists of them. Chapter 7 speaks of fracking and tracking this frack waste like medical wastes. But where has this been done? What are the results? We must wait until we know those answers. Methane migrates into drinking water. Waste disposal is not benign. Deep well storage, we learn in today's Democrat Chronicle, can trigger seismic events and does. There is no demonstrably safe way to get rid of frack wastewater. We must have answers about frack waste before we begin to drill. I will continue to believe there is no safe way to get rid of them until I see rigorous, long-term scientific studies. Finally, we do not have the resources in this state, and I want to know who will pay for the additional DEC staff that will conduct the reviews that are mentioned.
Thank you. We're going to call our next group of speakers. Our Our next group of speakers.
Speakers 23 through 31. Kate Bartholomew, Janet Stone, Steve Kittleberger, Anna Sears, Joseph Lavoie, Rachel Murlock. Sorry, it's either Murlock or Marlock. Susan Kinkel, Ann Baker, and Ken Zesserson.
Our next speaker is Lorraine Julian.
Thank you. I'm Lorraine Julian, and I'm from Rochester, New York.
Can you keep your voice up for us, please?
Yes. Is
Thank
this
you.
better?
Much better.
So I'm also talking about safe drinking water, and most of the world is without it, and we have the great decision of deciding how we're going to be sure that our drinking water is going to stay safe for all people. So the SGEIS does not ban fracking chemicals that are known to be toxic and carcinogenic and can include endocrine disruptors. Fracking is banned in the watersheds of New York City and Syracuse because they are unfiltered water sources, a clear admission of the risk to drinking water supplies. It follows that the drinking water supplied from private wells is equally at risk as our municipal water supplies, incapable of filtering out these chemical toxins. Current New York State regulations state that no matter what the chemical makeup, drilling waste can never be considered hazardous. I am concerned about toxic chemicals in fracking fluid, unacceptable risks of water contamination, and unequal standards of water protection. Fracking chemicals known to be toxic and carcinogenic must be prohibited. Levels of acceptability for known endocrine inhibitors must be based on the most up-to-date scientific evidence. Water protection standards must be consistent and long-term. Drilling waste must be designated and handled as hazardous when it in fact does contain hazardous material. My stated concerns are grounded in a faith tradition which promotes the dignified flourishing and health of humankind and of other living beings and all of nature with which we are totally interdependent.
Jean Durant, and then it will be Mary Kay Schmidt.
I'm Jeannie Durant, and I'm from Fairport, New York, and I'm here basically because I'm a citizen of the state, a concerned person and a human being that's concerned about the issues of the world. And I have a question. Why is New York State promoting an industry that refuses to tell the public the truth about the dangers of hydrofracking? Gas Company Executive Director Brad Gill quoted in a Rochester DNC article as saying that the New York State DEC's proposed regulations are far too restrictive, without scientific basis or rationale, asked for watershed and state land bans to be repealed and for some of the setbacks to be rolled back or eliminated. While Mr. Gill blithely dismisses the possibility that New York State residents will be exposed to any harmful effects of hydrofracking industry, the truth is that neither he nor anyone else knows for certain what the really long-term effects will be from hydrofracking. But intelligent citizens know that the gas company isn't necessarily the most honest in terms of what they will expose. As we've also discovered, the oil company, the corporations, etc., are not necessarily willing to expose all the intricacies of their situations. We're concerned about the fact that this water will pollute our freshwater supplies in the hydrofracking process. In reports of other states where hydrofracking has occurred, arsenic, a known deadly poison, and benzene, a known carcinogen, have been found in the drinking water. People, including children, have become very sick. The public water supply of the entire western New York area will be affected by the runoff from storage ponds, seepage from these chemicals, from drilling that forces the chemicals into the earth, our groundwater, and further into streams, rivers, creeks, and lakes. According to Richard Leipzig, an attorney in Buffalo who handled the Love Canal case, while a traditional well uses 90,000 gallons of water, hydrofracking uses 3 to 7 million gallons of water. No facility exists in New York State that can process wastewater from fracking. We haven't been told the truth about the expected 10,000 wells in the southern tier, and the fact they may need 1,000 tanker trucks for each well, and a new system of roads will need to be constructed and maintained, costing millions of tax dollars. Taxpayers have not been adequately informed of this, yet the literature sent to my house and the robocalls I have received has stated that